On the evening of February the 15th, 2023, a beautiful gathering of writers from across this land came together to read in support of award-winning Okanese First Nation writer and activist Dawn Walker. Enjoy this evening of readings.
Thank you, everyone, for joining this event tonight. My name is Matthew Behrens, and I work with a group called Women Who Choose to Live, which works with women who are criminalized and punished for surviving male violence. And the date that we have chosen, February the 15th, is the 20th anniversary of the largest anti-war protest in history, when millions of us took to the streets to try and stop the shock and awe slaughter of the Iraqi people. Some of you might remember that. And like most wars, this was a one-sided assault whose primary victims were women and children. And Canada was deeply implicated in that war, just as it's involved in the ongoing colonial wars on this land that largely target women here, from the matriarchs of Wet'suwet'en to the occupiers at Genpeg and Pimicikamak to the elders and youth at Muskrat Falls and Grassy Narrows. The war against women takes place every day and every evening in our communities and workplaces and places of worship and police stations and family courts and criminal courts and government offices and the media, and in how we as men especially, fail to prioritize women's lives. Millions took to the streets 20 years ago to protest war, but where are the millions protesting the war against women? The targets of the war against women are rarely able to access the resources and support they need, because ours is a government that spends over $35 billion annually on blow things up wars, while women's shelters and second stage housing projects are forced to hold bake sales and raffles. 2022, when Dawn was arrested, was the most dangerous year to date for women in the land known as Canada. A woman was murdered every other day, almost always by a man. The Canadian Femicide Observatory lists 184 victims of femicide in 2022. The thousands of Indigenous women and girls murdered or disappeared across this country in recent decades are victims of what a national inquiry calls a Canadian genocide. If you were to total up the maximum penalty for all the charges that Dawn faces for trying to protect herself and her son, it's 61 years. That explosion of overcharging was committed by the Saskatoon police, on whose front steps is a monument dedicated to missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. This same police force is tasked with monitoring Dawn, who is shackled to an electronic monitoring device. She must spend over $1,100 monthly simply to have supervised visits with her son. And when Dawn eventually does appear for trial, it will be in the colonial courts of Saskatchewan, where 91% of the judges are white and 75% of all incarcerated human beings are Indigenous, despite making up 16% of the population. It's a very painful reality, but there is also hope and joy in resisting this violence. When rallies popped up to support Dawn last summer, Indigenous organizations reported a significant uptake of calls from women seeking support. Erica Bowden of the Regina Treaty Status Indian Services said Dawn's situation had made a major impact. Quote, she said, it gave freedom for people to reach out, to move out of that isolation, as well as to know that maybe if they've lost hope, that there's a chance that there might be someone out there that could assist. Yesterday in Toronto, there was yet another large gathering for the 18th annual Strawberry Ceremony, a gathering in honor of missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, trans, and two-spirited people. And tonight's gathering is another expression of that refusal to surrender to violence, and an example of how our unified voices can come together to disarm the perpetrators of that violence and defund and dismantle the systems that sustain it. We hope that tonight's brilliant voices will inspire and uplift you wherever you are in your life. And we're starting off tonight with a writer who cleared his schedule to be part of this event. Richard Van Camp, who says, I've been a friend and a fan of Dawn's for years now, and I stand with her in support and friendship. Richard is a proud Telecho Dene from Fort Smith, Northwest Territories. He's the author of 27 books in 27 years in just about every genre. He's been the storyteller in residence at the Calgary Public Library, the writer in residence at the Metro Federation of Edmonton Libraries. He's been the writer in residence at the University of Alberta, Yellowhead Tribal College, and MacEwan University. He's also been the writer in residence at the University of the Fraser Valley in Abbotsford. You can find Richard on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, SoundCloud, YouTube, and at richardvancamp.com. He is everywhere, and tonight we are grateful that he is here and opening with a reading that would like to honor the sacred dancing child inside of Dawn. We're going to turn it over to Richard.
Oh, Matthew, let's give Matthew a round of applause. Matthew, Musty Cho, thank you for setting the stage. And Dawn, I know you're listening. We love you and we're here for you. And I just want to thank everybody for making time this evening to stand with our sister. I want to read a little story. It's called Show Me Yours from the Moon of Letting Go. And I ask everybody, if you can, just as I'm reading, it's just a little 9-minute short story. If you can find a picture of yourself as a baby, that would be wonderful. I'll ask you to show it at the end. Here we go. This is called Show Me Yours, and I dedicate this to Dawn, also her sister Kathy, who was a lighthouse for all of us we were so worried and so scared for Dawn and her son. And I'm just so happy and grateful that we get to share this evening with you, Dawn. You're never alone. And I hope you know that. I hope everybody here tonight knows that they're never alone. And if you ever feel lost, never be afraid to reach out to those you trust and get that help and support that you need, because there are so many people out there who would move mountains to be there for you. And I'm talking to each and every single one of you. So Musty Cho. So I'll introduce myself properly. Si Hobotsa Gotsoete Honey Ho Edmonton Nod Day, Richard Van Camp CA. My name is Richard Van Camp. I'm speaking to you tonight from Treaty 6 Territory, Edmonton, Alberta. I was born and raised in Fort Smith, Northwest Territories, where we're humble enough to be awesome and awesome enough to be humble. And we were really proud to bring Dawn up to Yellowknife for the Northwards Writers Festival. And Dawn, we'd love to invite you up in the future when it's safe to do so. That is a standing invitation. We want you to come on back so we can give you a beautiful hug and welcome you and honor you in a beautiful way. So here we go. This is called Show Me Yours. Saw Northern Lights last night, nice and big across the sky, 1:30, green. We saw baby ones trying to swim like little faint feathers, so we helped them by rubbing our fingernails together and whistling. And they swam, boy. The Northern Lights swam and reached across the sky, and it was the stairway to heaven kind, the kind that you can see the spirits of those who have passed on, walking up, up. We now walk around town with our baby pictures taped or glued over the pictures of the saints around our necks with leather ties. And so when you see someone with a leather necklace, you take your baby picture out and you show it to them, and they marvel at how beautiful you were when you were new. And they do the same. And then we praise each other. Oh, you were such a beautiful baby. Look at the dreams in your eyes. Oh, look at your hair, just like a bear's pelt in spring. Oh, you are so beautiful. So, so beautiful. Have a lovely, lovely life. That's how it is now. I am proud to say I started this after everything fell apart. It just happened. I woke up and I was in a bad place with bad people, and there was little hope for me. And there was my grandfather's leather necklace that the priest gave him with a saint I didn't know. And there was my favorite baby picture of me on top of the fridge, covered in lint and dust. And so I cleaned it and took some glue that we had been sniffing, and I glued my face over Saint What's-His humps, and I wore that necklace tucked under my shirt over my heart. 2 nights later, I got rolled, and as Frankie and Henry were going through my pockets and were holding me upside down, they pulled the necklace out. Henry stopped and said, "What's this, you?" Frankie squinted and dropped me. I told them it was a picture of me when I was a baby. They looked at each other and shook their heads. Take it easy, as if. They weren't mad, they were just, well, I don't know. They let me go and threw my money back at me. "Go home, Richard," they said. "You're not a man anymore." "I'm trying to be," I yelled and walked home, rubbing my jaw, stuffing my pockets back in. "I'm trying to be." 2 days later, I was walking around looking for smokes when they came up to me with goofy grins on their faces. And then Frankie and Henry showed me theirs. They did what I did and had MacGyvered saint necklaces to show their baby pictures. Oh, they were ugly babies. Maybe this is why they turned out to be such arseholes. But I showed them mine again, and we were just so happy to see each other like that. "Sorry for the other night," Frankie said. "It's okay," I said. "You were ugly babies," I thought, and we shook hands. Then Harvey and his wife came up to us and said, "Hey, what you're doing?" And we all turned and showed them our baby pictures and grinned. "How cute," Cynthia said. "Is that you?" We nodded like Gomers and beamed. "Oh, that is too precious," she said. "Let me take a picture." So we waited while she dug through her purse. Cynthia's trying to be a reporter, so we all helped out. Harvey offered us smokes, and we took a break. "Thanks for dancing with my wife," he said, and I blushed a little. Harvey doesn't like to dance, but his wife can't get enough. So when I go to the bar, she comes up and we two-step around, and holy cow, she's a great dancer. She keeps her right arm up and holds my hand just barely, and boy, we just glide and float around that dance floor like butterflies. And Harvey keeps his eye on me like a bull moose. And I always go up and shake his hand after, and he nods back, not too happy that I can dance like I do with his wife, but all the same, he's pleased that she's happy and enjoying herself. I know when I hold her on the dance floor, I can honestly tell how much she loves him, how she keeps her wedding ring polished just shiny, and I can tell how when she moves, that she moves for him, and that Cynthia is the best thing that ever happened to Harvey. So Cynthia came back and took a picture of us smiling, holding our baby pictures up, and it ended up in the paper. Then 2 days later, people came up to me and showed me their baby pictures around their necks on those leather necklaces, and we oohed and we awed each other, and we could just not stop laughing. "Oh, you were chubby, wah! Where did all your hair go, eh? Even then you were a heartbreaker." Whites, natives, Inuit, oh, we all laugh together when we see each other, and there are just so many beautiful babies inside us all. Well, now, after I got hurt at work, everybody who came to see me at my house showed me their baby pictures, and I just left mine out on the coffee table, and we laughed and laughed, passing them around. That pic of our little pictures in the paper really won the heart of our town. So that's what we do now. And to my surprise, Shauna came to see me. I had no idea she was back in town. I really missed her. How sad when I'm with someone she's single and vice versa. So now we finally got our timing right, and I held her hand and we walked down to the rocks and we saw the baby northern lights trying to swim, and she showed me how to call them. "You can do it! Give her! Go, go, go!" And those baby lights, they swam out little by little, and Shauna and I rubbed our fingernails together and whistled, and soon we had shadows because the northern lights were so bright. Soon it was like rolling rainbows across the sky. "You are so beautiful," she called and then looked to me. "Did you know it's the exact opposite in Nunavut?" Even though she had a new kind of haircut, she still had fox eyes. "What's that?" "They rubbed their fingernails to send them away." "Huh," I said, looking up, starting to shiver, but not because I was cold. Maybe they're just glad that we remember halfway what to do. As long as we honor them, hey, she said. I could tell she was going to be a great teacher. I could tell after she said that. And we walked across town holding hands back to my place. I wanted to tell her that sometimes the night was all I had left of her, but didn't. I shaved so I could be soft for her while she sang in the shower, and we made beautiful love. We took our time. We laughed and giggled and joked and kissed and caressed. And then we told each other about our lives and how hard it has been these past few years. We both wondered why the lovers we chose all turned out so mean. I noticed she still took the right side of the bed and had a few new moves, but we didn't need to talk about it. I missed your hand, she said. Yours too, I said. I told her to stick around, to quit leaving town. You could be the love of my life, I said. And she went quiet, running her fingers through my hair. I traced my finger along the scars across her arm where that half-wolf bit her. I'm the only man who's allowed to do that. The birds started to sing, so I lit her a smoke and we sat up together. I was about to get us some ice water for round two, and she said, wait. Then she took her beautiful baby Cree picture and held it up, and I put mine facing hers, and we kissed. Masi Cho, everybody. Can I ask everybody to get, if you can, your baby picture? And there's a reason I wanted to do this tonight for Dawn. I've been very lucky to meet George Littlechild. I've been very lucky to have two books out with Mr. Littlechild, and his Cree name is Nikawasis for Swiftchild. And every time we used to tour together before the pandemic, he would always talk about how every single one of us has a sacred dancing child inside of us. And we have a responsibility, a duty, an exquisite joy to honor that sacred dancing child in all of us. So Dawn, tonight, all of us are showing you the sacred dancing child in all of us, because tonight we dance with the sacred child in you and your son and your family. Bless you, Dawn. We stand with you. Masi Cho. Mwah.
It feels like we need a moment of just beautiful, ecstatic silence to honor that beautiful, beautiful gift, Richard. Thank you. And a beautiful way to start this evening, because as difficult as the obstacles that Dawn is facing, we know that such obstacles have been faced many, many times before, too many times. But it's when we come together like we are here tonight, and we are committing ourselves to coming together on many more such occasions in support of Dawn and her son, and the many Dawns and the many Dawn's children who are out there going through the same thing, who don't have that support yet. And hopefully they will start to receive that support as well. And maybe when there's enough support, we can bring down some of those walls and dismantle some of these systems that have created such pain and such trauma and such misery. Again, thank you, Richard, and a beautiful way to begin this evening's readings. Our next reader is someone who we're very privileged to have here. I first met Farzana 34 years ago. I had the honor of being arrested with her on the Mackenzie King Bridge outside the War Department in Ottawa. And we were arrested with about 120 other people and criminally charged to try and resist the NATO invasion of the Innu homeland of Nitassinan. It was there that NATO fighter bombers dropped 1,000-pound concrete dummy bombs in practice runs over the traditional lands of the Innu for the first war against the Iraqi people in 1991. They practiced that war over the Innu homeland. And at that time, elders like Rose Gregoire and Elizabeth Panashaway and many other Innu had been jailed for resisting this invasion, much as they resisted the violence against women that was often perpetrated by the military men at CFB Goose Bay. Farzana Doctor is a Toronto-based author, activist, and psychotherapist. She's published 4 critically acclaimed novels, including 7, which was shortlisted for the Trillium and Evergreen Awards. Her new poetry collection, You Still Look the Same, was called by Quill and Choir a powerful and necessary collection that breaks silences. It was released in 2022. And there's also an audiobook that Farzana has out now. And we're being encouraged to reserve it at our local libraries, because the more that we reserve it, the more that audiobook will get out there as well. Farzana is a founding member of We Speak Out and the NFGM Canada Network. And she's also the Mossy behind Dear Mossy, a new sex and relationships column for FGMC survivors. When she was asked why she's participating in tonight's event, Farzana said, "It's important for the writing community to be in solidarity with Dawn. We know that our quote unquote legal system treats survivors of violence and Indigenous communities with violence. Dawn must not be persecuted for attempting to protect herself and her child." Please welcome Farzana.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Matthew. That's a lovely introduction. And it's my privilege to be here and to contribute tonight. And Dawn, when I was trying to think of like, what should I read tonight? I just thought maybe what I would contribute is some stuff that is kind of talking about gendered existence and surviving this gendered existence and maybe even thriving within it. So the first poem I want to read is called Stretch Marks, and there's a Duran Duran reference in there for those of you who, nerd out about Duran Duran or were, young enough to do that. Stretch marks. "Why am I so scared?" Miriam asks. "I didn't used to be like this," Tammy says. I nod, solemn, as we 3 stand in a row atop jumping off rock, awaiting courage. One by one, we move to cliff's edge, look down, say, "Yes, now, 1, 2, 3, toes inch back." This middle age, skins marked by births and ink, sagging tits. I wonder why stretch marks don't make a body more supple. Tammy leaps, amid our gasp, splash. Miriam, with mock scream face, steps forward, and I, not wanting to be left alone, close eyes, plummet. Icy water, jumper cable shock awakens flesh. I'm 15 again, diving under, somersaulting, surfacing with a stupid wide grin for a great big world. I shake off to the rhythm of internal 80s soundtrack. Name myself Rio and dance upon the sand. Scale rough rock, barely notice scratched palms, pink welts rising on thighs from the rush back up. At the top, a pause. Why does the cliff seem higher now? Tammy laughs, and I think, yes, we didn't used to be like this. And here's a second poem, and it's meant to be lighthearted. The only true personal detail in this poem is about the dog. Just saying. Swipe left. The research question: what's it like to be a straight girl looking for love? My design may be flawed, but after many dates, countless online interactions to understand your customs, I've reached an interim hypothesis. Your men are a problem. Perhaps that's not accurate. I have no control group, and my subjectivity is the consistent dependent variable. My data suggests direct communication is not a norm. There is much baby, baby, smile for me, and jokes that go one beat too far. I don't profess expertise in linguistics. A colleague suggests my sample is skewed, that there are precisely 21 straight cis dudes ruining dating apps for everyone. I don't disagree with that theory, but doubt its accuracy. It's easy to recruit subjects. An ounce of ethanol, a single survey question. They'll follow you home. I stand by my method of observer immersion. An interesting finding. They think they are taking you to bed, even when it's your key turning the lock. My funding allows me to employ my dog, secondary researcher, to assess subjects at door. I document carefully the length and quality of each sniffing episode and whether she rolls her eyes or sits for a treat. A confounding variable. Once and only once did she snarl at a tall white man who wore a fedora and smelled of desperation. I dropped him from the study. Quixotic reliability. Each and every time I introduce queer theory into the interview, the subjects reveal one identical porn fantasy. The most significant part of the experiment is not the most pleasurable, and vice versa. I'm not always certain how to code pillow talk. Qualitative data tumbles from lips, leaves stains on my pillowcases, outlines lingering for weeks. I've recorded 31% tenderness, combined with 66% white supremacy and 72% mansplaining. At the end of the project, I will deactivate my account, ghost my participants, won't present any findings. And my next poem is called Perimenopause, something that is very much a reality in my life right now. Perimenopause, mid-morning, dense fog descends, visibility low, nothing, flying out of here today, best to shut down, face gray sky, wait for gloom to clear. What to do about loss of words, arguments I can't win, this interminable grounding. 1 a.m., I am a red ember, my rage glowing in the dark, long after everyone has turned off lamps. The world tossing, turning me, sun-deprived skin slick with mad sweat, body simmering in 40-odd years of bullshit. That's the only poem I've ever written where I've ended it with bullshit, and it feels really good. Okay, my last poem. This one is called Never Alone. You who have always lived in crowded houses, too much furniture, too many eyes, incidental contact in every hallway, ask me, isn't it hard to live alone? I shake my head, but on highway bus ride past lake and fields to looming city, a question, am I living wrong? Apartment lock clicks, silent welcome. I drop keys into ceramic just to hear their clatter. Remember that C's hands crafted the bowl. From pockets, used tissue, transit stub, free hugs, change purse, a gift from Kay, recycled bottle, plastic worn smooth, recalls tipsy singing, waft of birthday candle smoke. T's painting would leave behind a rectangle of light on wallpaper if I ever moved. I say her name, wonder how she is. You gave me your old couch, and tonight, like most evenings, I settle into your indent. My bookshelf holds mentors, every closet, cupboard filled with friends. I am never alone. And Dawn, you're not alone. Thank you.
Thank you, Farzana. That was beautiful. And again, we are just so blessed to have such an amazing array of voices here tonight. And everyone here is donating their time, their love, their talent, their solidarity. And in addition to supporting Dawn, it's important to support those who support Dawn. So I encourage everyone who is here tonight to look up the writers that you both know and maybe are hearing for the very first time tonight. And as you do so, order their books. We see a decline in civil discourse in our society. And a big part of that is the fact that people are discouraged from reading and from reading really powerful voices like those we're seeing here tonight. So thank you again, Farzana. And again, if people want more information, just look, Google Farzana. She's got their own website. Everything's good to go. Our next reader is someone who used to work for a magazine that highly praised Farzana's work. And I must say was a co-worker at Quill and Choir magazine. And it's, when you are in a job and one of your favorite things is the co-worker who always makes you laugh. And I'm always grateful for the laughter that was always shared in our workspace with Megan Strymus, who is an amazing writer and educator who lives now in Hamilton with her family. She's the program lead of Humber College's Bachelor of Creative and Professional Writing program. And her last book of poems, Yes or Nope, which is available for purchase, was awarded the Trillium Award for poetry. You can also read her recent essay, That Time and Trailer, number 289 in the anthology Good Mom on Paper, Writers on Creativity and Motherhood, which look at the often invisible challenges of a literary life when you have little ones. The manuscript written with a baby sleeping in a carrier, missing a book launch for a bedtime, crafting a promotional tour around childcare, but also celebrating the systems that nurture writers who are mothers, the successes, the intricate, interconnected joys of these roles. Megan's poems have been described as exploring the lives of girls, women, and a few bad men who maybe wish that they were a little better. She tackles the darkest and most disturbing subjects with a sense of humor that never fails to find evidence of a grand cosmic joke. Bad relationships, unhealthy friendships, and creepy neighbors abound in her most recent lively collection, which is as compulsively readable as it is emotionally unsettling. And there's also a poem about hog farming. In her statement in support of Dawn, Megan said, like Dawn Walker, I am the mother of a young son. I know that if my child was ever threatened, I would do anything to protect him. I also know that the justice system routinely fails women, and in particular, Indigenous women. We are so pleased to have you here tonight. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Matthew. And thank you everyone for being here. Dawn, I am here with you in solidarity and in love. When I was thinking about what I wanted to read tonight, I thought it was most fitting to read about motherhood and some of the challenges that motherhood can bring, but also some of the joys too. So I am going to read from the essay, That Time in Trailer 289. And the only thing I think you need to know, I'm just going to read a part of the essay, is that at the start of the journey, of the start of the essay, I'm given a key, and the key is one of those kind of sawed-off half broom handles with a piece of rope and the keys dangling from it. It's the kind of key that you would get like at a really classy kind of gas station or somewhere. You're in a fancy establishment when you get the sawed-off broom handle key. And I spent a couple of weeks in a trailer writing. I was lucky enough to in a trailer park that my dad manages. And this is That Time in Trailer 289. And so I begin. When Lou was a year old, I went back to a busy teaching job, having been hired full-time at a college just weeks before he was born. I sweated my way through a series of increasingly intense interviews and mock teaching exercises for the position while wearing ever more loose-fitting clothes to hide my growing baby bulge. Off to a roaring start, a gal pal had said to me when I told her I had both landed the job and was pregnant. I wasn't exactly welcomed by some of the individuals at the college who liked to refer to themselves as senior faculty. I'd never gone to teachers' college, and unlike the two women who had been hired at the same time as me, I did not have a PhD nor any interest in acquiring one. And of course, I'd spent my first year as a full-time professor on unpaid mat leave. And it quickly became obvious that my creative aspirations and meager successes as a writer did not inspire awe among my peers. Plus, I was a mother, a new one. I was still breastfeeding. My tits were heavy and huge. At work, they ached for my son. My right breast, the one I'd named Bessie, after a cow my mom had been most fond of as a child, would spurt milk if I accidentally brushed up against the edge of my desk. She was a prize milker and the cause of great stress. I often wished I could leave her at home. One of my colleagues shouted, "Babies, yuck," when I mentioned I'd had a hard time leaving my 1-year-old son at daycare that morning. None of the 3 women I shared an office with had children. In their view, I was an unethical, selfish idiot because I'd brought a child into this god-awful world. I was a writer, mother, and a professor. To borrow a great line from Alice Munro, who did I think I was? 3 months after my return to work, my husband, Nathan, got diagnosed with throat cancer. He immediately began a rigorous course of radiation and chemo, and our lives became about coping. As irrational and as immature as it sounds, I felt like I'd been abandoned by him to care for our son on my own. The reality was he was fighting to survive. One morning, after dropping Lou off so I could drive the hour to work, I screamed at the windshield the entire way. I was so hoarse that I could barely teach my classes. I did, though. Sometimes I'd hide in the bathroom so I could breathe for a few minutes. I had my favorite stall, and it was there in this grubby cubicle that I sat and sobbed after a student said she could tell I was trying, but that she was sick of being taught by people like me, people with fairy tale lives. I was tempted to tell her just how wrong she was, using the 2 bottles of cheap white wine I drank the night before as evidence. Loser, 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 I chanted as I hit the side of my head with my fist again and again. Around this time, my friend Stuart Ross called to see how I was doing. His wife, Lori, had recently completed cancer treatment, so Stu understood much of what I was going through. I confessed that I was falling apart. He suggested I write something and said that if I wrote a new book of poems, he'd edit it and publish it under his poetry imprint. My first impulse was to say no. There was no way I could write a book in the middle of all this mess. I said yes. I did my 2 weeks in Trailer 289, and I finished the book, yes or no. The AC kept me cool and helped me drown out the whining of the chainsaws and leaf blowers. There was an old timer with an old ponytail, and he never came by. I read and I wrote and I napped in the sun, curled up in the love seat because I was too afraid to stretch out on the bed. The soiled mattress looked like an ancient map that had been rescued from a moldy trunk. The flies stayed away until I was ready to leave. I left the place spotless, a small gesture of thanks. The book received some very positive reviews. I got added to a couple of course lists and won an award. Writing, I was relieved to discover, still held a significant place in my life. Recently, Lou made a card for Nathan and me that said, "I love you because you help me when I'm struggling." We laughed because we'd never heard him speak of any struggles. Has he ever really had any? One morning, while I was bending over to put on my socks, still partially undressed, Lou said, "Mommy, your boobies look like 2 hanging bats." "Thanks a lot, Lou." "What?" "I love bats," he said. The narrator of Sigrid Nunez's novel, What Are You Going Through, says, there are 2 kinds of people in the world. Those who, upon seeing someone else suffering, think, that could happen to me. And those who think, that will never happen to me. The first kind of people help us to endure, and the second kind make life hell. Children help us get through, maybe not actively or wittingly, but they do. Sometimes they keep us alive because they need us to keep them alive. They are tied to us like hunks of wood to a key, and we are duty bound to preserve them. Thank you very much. Thanks, everyone.
Your reference, sorry, I was muted. Your reference to what it is that we do when we see someone in that situation and the choices that we make. And in the chat right now, I'm asking those of you who are participating and watching tonight to make a choice. You're here because you know about what is going on with Dawn. You know about the individual struggle that she is waging. You know about the institutional struggle that so many women in this country, especially Indigenous women, are waging in the criminal courts and in the family courts. And so I am just posting now a place where you can send an e-transfer, or you can go online to the GoFundMe campaign and make a contribution there if you've got access to a credit card. No donation is too small. When you look at the GoFundMe, it's just a beautiful long line going back to the arrest last August of people sending in $5, $10, $15, $20, $100. And we're up to over $36,000 right now, which is really amazing. We've still got a long way to go, but never think that, oh, I can only give $5. That's not going to make a difference. It will make a difference. And we very much appreciate the support that you are all showing by being here tonight. And again, as I mentioned earlier, please look up these wonderful, wonderful writers and purchase their works and share the beauty and the messages that speak so much to our universality, our humanity, all these things that we share. Our next reader is a gentleman who describes himself as a blue-collar guy in a white-collar world, living in a tie-dyed neighborhood, writing in broken English, dreaming in Cree, in a concrete forest, my skin a chameleon of colors, from a whiter shade of red in spring to the dark brown of summer, to the earth tones of fall, and then the darker shade of white in winter. And you ask me, why are you confused? Duncan Mercredi is a Cree Métis poet, writer, and storytelling with 6 books of poetry published. And he's also had his work featured in anthologies of Indigenous writings and periodicals such as Prairie Fire and CV2. He attended the Banff Center Screenwriting Workshop after receiving the Ross Charles Award. He's participated in the Winnipeg International Writers Festival, the Storytellers Festival in Winnipeg, the University of Manitoba's For the Love of Words Conference, Brandon University's Aboriginal Writers and Storytellers Festival, the Prince George Storytellers and Writers Festival, the Singing Waters Storytellers Gathering. He's also been a writer in residence at the University of Manitoba, and for the last 3 years was Winnipeg's Poet Laureate, and with good reason. He's currently working in collaboration with Dr. Glenn Burr to have some of his pieces accompanied by music and become songs. And he hopes to release a record sometime in the next year. When he was asked why he was joining tonight's event in support of Dawn, Duncan was very clear and beautiful in his response. Quote, when one knows someone is being abused, not just by someone she was close to until they showed their truth, and is also being abused by the system that was supposed to protect her, we must raise our fists and voices as one to stand beside her, not behind her. And standing beside Dawn tonight, along with everyone else, is Duncan Mercredi. And Duncan, I'm just going to pin you up here and ask you to take it away. And I think you're muted. You're muted there, my friend.
Watchie, Damak. And always a little great to hear Eden's laugh. Always reminds me of everywhere I've been. It's always Eden laughing. And Richard too, of course, they've had great times with him. I'm going to read you 3 pieces. and I'm going to be kind of covering an area, and I think, especially the ones with politicians, when they talk about Indigenous people, they never say the Indigenous people of this country. They always say our Indians. Okay, and so I wrote this piece just a few days ago in response to that term, our Indians. I is not your Indian, discovered to be claimed like some forgotten piece, godless, soulless, forever wandering across the wilderness. I is not your Indian. The dust I was traveled across the universe, vast stretches of time between suns, then settled on a turtle's back, knowing my path was predetermined, bathed in stardust, born in sacred waters. I is not you Indian. I is unique. I is not soulless. I is dust, created among the stars, shaped by time and distance. I is not you Indian. You is not my ally. And I will get this other one from a book that I wrote about the discovery of children, called 215. It's about a child walking with his mother. Drifting down the river, your head on my shoulder, pointing at all the places where I sat and wondered, who else counted the stars at night? You held my hand tightly, asked me which star birthed you. I replied as I pointed between the 6 sisters, hidden from our eyes. It is a star that has faded from our memories. This much I know. As faded as it has become, it still carries a memory that I carry too. I know where you are. I know who you are. I know. Maybe my memory is not what it once was. Maybe my light has dimmed. Even if they placed you where it was dark, you will still see it shine. One day you will wake, that night will not be so dim. And the path you will follow will lead you back home. Drifting down the river, your head on my shoulder, pointing at all the places where I sat and wondered, who else counted stars at night? I was raised by women. My father was there, but the men in our village rarely partook in the raising of the child because they were hardworking men. And so they taught us how to hunt, how to trap, how to fish. But the women taught us about life. And I think we've forgotten that over time for many men, even our own. We've forgotten who it is that raised you, who it was that birthed you, who gave you that name that you carry. And so I wrote a piece for the women. Sounds like thunder. When she speaks, her voice sounds like thunder. Seeking solace in sadness, hoping drink will erase the grief, and it echoes and echoes, shaking your faith on the ground you stand on. When she cries, sounds like thunder. The weight she carries makes her tremble. She shakes. she shakes the rattle she holds, but no one answers her prayer. When she sings, sounds like thunder. A whisper, dragging that memory from her soul, she dances that ache away. When her feet touch the ground, her sounds like thunder, echoes, 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 echoes. When she speaks, sounds like thunder. When she cries, sounds like thunder. When she sings, sounds like thunder. When she dances, sounds like thunder as it fades away. Thanks for listening. Your last bit now.
Thank you so much, Duncan. It truly is a privilege to be here tonight with such a range of voices and experiences and perceptions of what it is to be human beings on this land and in this life and in this world. And so many of you so far tonight have spoken about things that relate to family. And Dawn's family has been rudely invaded by the state, the colonial state of Canada. She's not the only one. There are tens of thousands of women whose families are regularly invaded by the state. And as I said earlier, Dawn is not only facing 61 years worth of charges in criminal court, she's also facing day after day a battle in family court, where so much of the reality of women's existence is disappeared by judges who just refuse to recognize the reality of male violence against women and against children. And I'm going to share in the chat a link, but I also want to share with you this Facebook page. And I really encourage you, even if you're not involved in this, it's called Family Court Hurts. And it features this beautiful artwork by Christy Belcourt and Isaac Murdoch. And this is a gathering place for women who, like Dawn, are struggling day in and day out not to have their children seized out from under them, which is the shameful legacy of this colonial land. So please go to that Facebook page and get involved, because that is a struggle even after the criminal charges have been hopefully dispensed with, that Dawn is going to have to carry on. And if we stand with Dawn, we stand with her in the criminal courts as well as in the family courts. Duncan spoke about somebody's laughter recently in your introduction. And our next reader is someone with a wonderful laugh and whose literature sings with the joy of laughter and humanity. Her name is Eden Robinson. You might know her as Megan Strymus, but that's just because there's a real bond that took place in the pre-show chat here tonight. But when we do pin you up there, Megan, sorry, Eden, we know that it is you, and you have not been invaded by the Hamiltonian who seeks to usurp your position here in the reading. For those who are unfamiliar, and I don't think there are too many, Eden is the author of an amazing series of novels. Monkey Beach, Blood Sports, Son of a Trickster. She wrote the short story collection Traplines and Sasquatch at Home, Traditional Protocols in Modern Storytelling. Traplines won Britain's Winifred Holtby Memorial Prize. If you're not familiar with Winifred Holtby, she is one of the most remarkable writers of Britain's 20th century. So it's quite an award, and the New York Times Notable Book of the Year in 1998. Monkey Beach won the Ethel Wilson Fiction Prize in 2001. It was longlisted for the Dublin Impact Award and shortlisted for both the Giller Prize and the Governor General's Literary Award for Fiction. in 2000. She has also been honored for her contributions to Canadian literature with something called the Writers Trust Engel Findlay Award. She's an MFA graduate in creative writing at UBC. And also, I think, one of the most generous souls you could ever hope to come across. A number of years ago, an Inuk grandmother by the name of Beatrice Hunter was thrown into a maximum security penitentiary thousands of kilometers from her home in Nunatsiavut for trying to stop the methylmercury poisoning of the country food web downstream of Muskrat Falls. And the Labrador Land Protectors reached out to Eden Robinson and said, can you add your voice of support to Beatrice, much as Eden is adding her voice of support tonight for Dawn? And Eden immediately got back to us and said, quote, when nonviolent grandmothers are imprisoned for protecting their land, the action speaks loudly about how Canada really feels about Indigenous people. It speaks loudly about how we treat our elders. It speaks loudly about who we want silenced and how far we're willing to go to silence voices we don't want to hear. My prayers and thoughts are with you, Beatrice Hunter. I'm so sorry you have to endure this, but I'm in awe of your strength and your spirit. Many hugs and much respect, Eden Robinson. Eden very quickly responded when invited to this event and basically said, just tell me where to be and I'll be there. And she wrote about Dawn the following. Dawn is one of the most talented comedic writers I've read. Although I don't know her personally, I'm praying hard for her and her child. My heart goes out to her. I've witnessed so much violence against Indigenous women, and it is so rare to get justice or even help. Big hugs, Dawn. And thank you, Eden, for being here tonight to offer that love and support for Dawn.
Thank you, Matthew. It is truly a privilege to be on this very esteemed panel. I admire all of your artistry. I would also like to, I first got to know Dawn through Nobody Cries at Bingo. And it was a fantastic introduction. Glass Beats, the Chicken Prairie Dance Tour. She is such a fantastic writer. I urge you to check out her work in the libraries or at bookstores as well. Tonight, I'm going to be reading a short piece from Monkey Beach, which is 22 years old now. Had its book birthday. So this is my character's safe space. Mick took me guachlum picking in the spring. We wandered through the bushes, stopping to examine interesting trees or listen to birds or throw rocks in rivers. We scanned the ground for serrated broadleaves of salmonberry shoots, guachlum. You had to be careful not to pick the ones higher than your knees, because once they were that tall, the stalks became woody and no amount of chewing would make them soft. Winter in Kitimat meant a whole season of flaccid, expensive vegetables from town. Guachlum was the first taste of spring. The skin of the shoots had a texture similar to kiwi skin, prickly soft. Once you peeled them, the shoots were translucent green, had a light crunch and a taste close to fresh snow peas. Guachlum picking lasts a few weeks at best. Uncle Mick had 2 large bundles of guachlum under his arms. I had a smaller one that I'd reduced to 2 shoots by the time Mick was ready to get back to his truck. Strap this off at Mother's, Mick said. Mama'o's house was one of the oldest in the village, a box with a low ceiling basement and a steeple-like roof. It was painted a plain flat brown, which was peeling back to reveal grave wood. The glass in the windows was so warped that the world outside looked like it was being reflected through a funhouse mirror. She never liked gardening, so the lawn was wild, with tree-high elderberry bushes and a tangle of untrimmed grass. Mick opened the door and stepped inside. "Youts, Mick," Mama'o said. She brushed her hands against her apron as she came out of the kitchen. Here, Mick said. Oh, I was wanting her, she said. Come in, sit, have tea. We followed her into the kitchen where freshly baked biscuits were cooling on the countertops. Once I was eating and quiet, she turned to Mick and they talked while I watched everything around me. Inside, she kept the house tidy, but she didn't bother to decorate like other grandmas I knew. There was nothing on the walls, no doilies on the chairs, no knickknacks on her coffee table. Her saggy orange sofa never moved from the spot by the front window. I was afraid to touch the curtains because they were so threadbare. If you breathed hard, they whispered against her cracking linoleum. She had a heavy black rotary phone that rang like a fire alarm. On the phone stand, she kept a picture of her husband, Sherman, who had died before I was born. Another picture of Uncle Mick holding a giant halibut and a popsicle stick house I'd made for her in kindergarten and painted hearts all over. Even when the glue wore out and the popsicle sticks fell off, she didn't throw it away. Mama wore Salvation Army thrift shop clothes, shirts and dresses she turned into aprons when they got too thin. When the aprons wore out, she made them into wash rags, and when the rags disintegrated, she used them for stuffing in her pillows. This habit of wearing things until they fell off her body annoyed Mom to no end. She'd regularly buy Mama O's stylishly cut dresses, slacks, and shirts. Mama O would carefully put them away in her storeroom and say she'd wear them when she was trying to impress someone. Her fishing nets, on the other hand, she kept immaculate, so they looked brand spanking new. Much later, I suggested that since she was so good at fixing nets, she'd probably be good at crocheting. She threw her head back and roared, laughing so hard she had to sit down. Mama never locked her doors, reasoning that she had nothing anyone would really want. I think it was because no one had ever locked their doors, and doing it seemed rude. We always locked our doors because someone had broken into our house and taken our videos, video player, and TV. Mom and Dad had shaken their heads at the state of things in the village. Well, Dad had said, now we can buy a VHS. We'd gotten Beta because he claimed the quality was way better, but now it looked like everyone was going VHS because it was vaguely embarrassing to admit we'd picked the wrong machine. We'd never made the switch. Mama O didn't even have Beta. Her TV was a relic from the black and white era with foil wrapped around its rabbit ears. Sometimes it picked up truckers on their CBs or a radio station out of Vancouver. We'd be watching some soap and suddenly the characters would be interrupted by a voice saying, 16 slick today, good buddy. The steep roof, the creaky dark wood, the crooked steps, the smell of age and mildew would have been enough to keep all but the desperate away. But the truth was, no one broke into her house because everyone thought it was haunted. Thank you. Oh, yay. I'm not on mute. I did that for a reading once.
Well, that's a hard act to follow there, I must say. But thank you so much for your beautiful support and your wonderful writing and just the joy that you bring wherever you are. It's just incredibly appreciated. And for all those who are watching online, if you haven't read Eden's work, do it. It's absolutely worth your while. And speaking of books, one thing you can do is get your copy of the Prairie Chicken Dance Tour by Don Dumont. That's Don Walker. And let's make this thing go right up the charts, because I want the Crown Prosecutor to open up the Globe and Mail and see that the #1 fiction book in this country is by Don Walker. Let's order those books. You can go online, look it up, the Prairie Chicken Dance Tour, and let's just piss off that Crown attorney by making this the top selling fiction book from now right up until the trial. Our next reader is a brilliant author and novelist and human rights advocate. And I think I would add to all of those the descriptor tireless. She speaks French, Arabic, English, and righteous social justice fluently. She holds a PhD in finance from McGill University. And her first book, Hope and Despair, published in 2008, documents a very personal and painful ordeal after her husband, Meher Arar, was arrested, detained, and tortured with Canadian complicity in a Syrian dungeon, and how she campaigned to free him, to bring him home, and to clear his name. Hope and Despair was shortlisted for the Book Award of the City of Ottawa. And then her first novel, Mirrors and Mirages, was published by House of Anansi. It was a finalist for the City of Ottawa Book Award and the Trillium Award in its original French version. In 2017, Monia also published her second novel, Hope Has Two Daughters, which is an amazing tale set against the backdrop of the Tunisian bread riots of 1984 and the Jasmine Revolution in 2010. Monia is a very prolific writer. She has her own blog, and you can often see her on the web pages of Rabble. And last summer, she attended a powwow for the very first time, and she wrote a beautiful essay about the need for members of the Muslim community to engage with their Indigenous sisters and brothers and siblings. And she wrote, quote, "As a Muslim woman, I often feel judged for my choice to wear long dresses and skirts and covering my hair with a hijab. But when I was holding hands with a young woman who danced with me with such elegance, grace, and smiles in the powwow circle, I didn't feel a single ounce of judgment." And when I first asked Monia if she would join this event, she was overseas in Tunisia very late at night, but she got right back to me immediately and said that she would love to join this event. And she wrote, quote, "I can't remain silent with regards to what happened to Dawn Walker. Going after the most vulnerable in our society is morally wrong. Dawn needs to be protected, not prosecuted." And her reading tonight is from The Gripping Hope and Despair, and it describes that book, that roller coaster ride that so many, like Dawn, experience as they try to overcome this massive violence from the state that's thrown in their way. Please welcome Monia.
Thank you. Thank you, Matthew. Dawn, it's terrible what you are going through. Perhaps you don't know me, but I'm very, very honored to be along my colleagues, writers, and share some of what I have written. Specifically, I chose to read from Hope and Despair, my first book, but also a memoir about injustice and about racism and about state violence. So I'm going to read about 3 pages of the last, basically the 3 last pages of the book. Our lives will bear the scars forever. When I was a little girl, I didn't fully understand my mother's words when she told me human beings don't know what is good for them. Why is she telling me that? Isn't it easy to find out what's good for us? Seeing things through my child's eyes, I accused adults of complicating things. The years that the public inquiry lasted changed Meher. He came to exist for that alone. It was his full-time job, his favorite subject of discussion, the topic he was most at home with. I will always look back with a smile to the day when Hood, my son, answered someone who asked what his father did in life. He works at the Commission of Inquiry. The little boy replied innocently, hardly surprising, because every day he saw his father get ready and then leave the house to attend the public hearing being held in Ottawa, or heard him discussing the inquiry with his lawyers on the telephone. Meher's imprisonment in Syria had broken him, morally and physically. The public inquiry held him hypnotized, transfixed. He became a man obsessed. The search for the truth he had dedicated himself to drove him in. Tirelessly, he read his way through document after document, always in the hope that the inquiry would give him the answer he had been denied. His name had been destroyed, slandered, his reputation ruined, his career crashed. The public inquiry was the only way for him to break this infernal cycle he had been thrown into that fateful September 26. Before my husband was arrested and my whole life collapsed, I believe I would got the better of my mother and all of the adults of my childhood. I thought I would find happiness with my husband, 2 children, and a relatively easy life in Canada. All of it vanished in the twinkling of an eye. Happiness would never again taste the same to me. Now I see it in a different light. I try to go beyond appearances and impressions. Our lives are fragile things. Happiness is almost impossible to grasp. What we make of our lives every day is what bring us a little closer to happiness. When my husband was arrested by the Americans, then sent off to Syria, I could have chosen to remain silent, to hide, to see myself as a victim and lament my fate, but I chose not to. I took another path. When my husband returned to Canada, changed forever after a year of imprisonment and torture, once again, I could have remained silent, fled the media, found a job, and tried to be forgotten. Once again, I refused that option. I don't regretting doing what I did. My husband, my children, and I have all suffered as a result. But I believe that the inquiry, despite its ups and downs, despite our doubts, our dreams, has brought us much, both as individuals and as a society. Meher was finally able to clear his name, and the whole question of national security as opposed to human rights was re-examined. In the aftermath of September 11, the dominant view was that security must override individual rights. That doctrine is no longer viable. The public inquiry proved that nothing can be more precious than a just balance between security and human rights. Leaning too far in one direction or the other can only lead us onto dangerous ground for either human rights or security. On January 25th, 2007, 4 months after the publication of Mr. Justice O'Connor report, the government of Canada, led by Stephen Harper at that time, presented us with its official apologies. In a letter addressed to my husband, Meher Arar, which I have framed and hung over my desk, he writes, on behalf of the government of Canada, I wish to apologize to you, Monia Mazig, and your family for any role Canadian official may have played in the terrible ordeal that all of you experienced in 2002 and 2003. It was I who insisted that our lawyer obtain that letter. Its words written black on white. I wanted Bara'a and Hood to be able one day to read those words and not live their lives in the shadows. Words that can disappear into thin air are not enough. I had learned they must be recorded. Over the last 6 years, I have lost what my many families tried so hard to build, stability. I lived my life from day to day, not knowing when misfortune will strike again. My husband's name, those of my children, and even my own were linked to terrorism. We were spied upon, scrutinized, and examined minutely. Even though I have long lost my childhood enthusiasm, I have not lost my ability to look at the world like a child. I have kept my naivety and the kind of innocence that has many times saved me from falling into depression and pessimism. When I learned later in the course of the public inquiry that certain individuals in the government apparatus had done their utmost to block my husband's return and to obstruct me in Canada, I thanked God with all my heart for protecting my faith and the hope that better days would come. My two children, Bara and Hood, were my constant companions in this search for justice. They were a constant source of inspiration, the wellspring of hope from which every day I drew the courage I needed to pursue my path. In their simple desire to play, speak, and simply to grow, they helped me keep my feet firmly planted on the ground. When I looked into their eyes, I understood that life goes on above and beyond our misfortunes, and that there is always meaning to be found, even in our worst of trials. And I'm quoting here a verse from the Quran, and this is how I ended the book. It says, "It may be that ye dislike a thing, and Allah brings about, though it a great deal of good." Thank you very much.
Thank you, Monia. It's wonderful to have you here. And I'd like to point out that in addition to your generosity in being here tonight, we were in a meeting this morning where you were offering your assistance to another group of individuals who are detained, 50 Canadian men, women, and children detained in Syrian concentration camps. The government has fought for years to prevent their return as Muslim Canadian citizens. And the same system which forces Dawn to spend $1,100 a month for supervised visits with the child that she sought to protect is now trying to forcibly separate Canadian children from their mothers, saying the Canadian children can come home, the Canadian mothers must stay in the Syrian concentration camps. And so the inquiry that Monia was speaking about made amazing recommendations about how to prevent such a horrific crime being committed against anyone because of their heritage, their religion, their skin color. And yet here we are 20 years after Monia's tale begins, still dealing with that same Islamophobic violence. Monia, thank you again for sharing that story and for always being open to new relationships and new forms of support. Our final reader of this evening is someone you've heard a lot about tonight. And it is a great, great privilege to know and work with Dawn and to have had my eyes open to a new way of looking at the world. And that's the wonderful thing I find about our relationships with one another is when you meet someone new, you see the world through a different set of eyes if you are open to doing so. And unfortunately, Dawn has come up against a lot of people who don't have that humility to be able to say, I'm curious about how you view and experience the world as well. Dawn is a Plains Cree writer, a former lawyer, a comedian, and a journalist from the Okanese First Nation, whose first book Eden talked about, Nobody Cries at Bingo, which is a fictionalized, humorous account of her life growing up on reserve. And she says that that book was inspired by the writing of David Sedaris. And in 2012, it was shortlisted for an Alberta Reader's Choice Award and a Robert Kretsch City of Edmonton Award. And in 2021, the French translation of the book was nominated for a Governor General's Award for translation. Dawn followed this up with Rose's Run, which is the story of a single mom who enters a marathon in an effort to boost her self-esteem. And the Pacific Rim of Review of Books described it as integral Canadian literature and praised Dawn's self-depreciating, honest, comprehensive, and confidential sense of humor. This book won the 2015 Saskatchewan Book Award for Fiction, and the Saskatoon then Star Phoenix hired Dawn as a twice monthly columnist in 2015. Dawn has written a series of short stories, which was highly praised, won numerous awards. And in 2022, her book, The Prairie Chicken Dance Tour, was shortlisted for the Stephen Leacock Memorial Medal for Humour. Dawn has also performed, just in her spare time, I suppose, because I don't know how she packs all this into a day, as a stand-up comic. She was the story editor for an animated APTN program called By the Rapids. And she wrote regular columns in Eagle Feather News and the Saskatoon Star Phoenix, and is also an executive operating officer of the Federation of Sovereign Indigenous Nations since 2016. And I earlier referred to the joy of picking up this book. And I actually had to put it down after a few pages because it was late at night and I didn't want to wake anybody up because I was laughing too hard. I totally related to Dawn's description of one character who she writes stood out like a donkey at a racetrack. To me, that's the magic of literature, when an author helps us recognize something of ourselves in another character. So perhaps we see ourselves there and we don't feel so all alone in this big old crazy world of ours. And I think tonight there are many women across this land who can relate to the nightmare that Dawn is going through. And Dawn, you're speaking out your proud defiance of these colonial systems that are trying to oppress you are an inspiration. But much as we can all be here tonight and applaud you, I think hopefully we can all recognize that you cannot do this on your own. So tonight's event is one of many where we can show support to Dawn and also openly defy those colonial systems which are attacking Dawn and so many women. So again, I urge you to donate to Dawn's support fund, take a selfie of support, put it on social media. I stand with Dawn Walker. Get involved with the Family Court Hurts group, because there's thousands of women who need our support. And maybe the template of supporting Dawn and beating back this violence will set an example for those forces to say, do not touch, do not oppress anymore. Dawn, we very much look forward to hearing you tonight.
Thank you so much, Matthew. Before I start, I just wanted to say a special thank you to Matthew, of course, who runs Women Who Choose to Live, and who has just been a tremendous advocate. Kim Lee Wong, who has started Family Court Hurts from her own experience, who was very kind enough to share that experience with me, and who has counseled me and helped me get through some of the darkest times of my life. I also want to thank Tony and for organizing this and with his usual confidence, and my sisters Kathy and Patricia Dorian for also being there. I am a survivor of domestic violence, and I have found that there are 3 responses when people know that you are a victim. Very similar to what Megan was saying. There are people who will just attack you because they recognize that vulnerability and they want to hurt you more. I don't know why. There are others who look away and ignore your pain because, again, they hope that it won't happen to them. And then there's a third group. They're the ones who rush to help and who don't stop helping. They're the people who run towards the danger. And I'm so grateful that people like that exist. If I had to compare them to a character from Game of Thrones, I would say they're the Jon Snows of the world. During one of the darkest times of my life, which was December of this year, I started writing a book called Love Stories for the End of the World, which were completely inspired by some dreams that I had, probably from all the antidepressants that I'm on. And this is a pretty sad story that is got a little bit of hope in it, and it is based on a true story. And there's a character in here that has probably become my favorite character that I've ever written. And she's just a 10-year-old girl, because sometimes in life, the bravest people are the little ones who have to stand up for themselves. It's called Thirst. There were 3 of them, They showed up wearing thin coats, though it was mid-February. They had all the same bowl haircut, their bangs cut too short for their faces, but straight. Gloria supposed it was another foster home mom that had done it in an attempt to deal with their hair. The hair was always the worst part with girls. "What are your names?" she asked as they stood in the kitchen in their socks, still wet from their walk from the car to the house. None of them had winter boots. "I'm Frances. This is Marie, and this is Leila," the tallest one said. "Your sisters can speak for themselves. What's your ages then?" "I'm 10. 8. Marie's voice shook. All of her was shaking. 5. Leila had a slight lisp. All of them had accents, though anyone could tell that they were natives with their dark skin and almond eyes. "My name is Gloria, and that's what you can call me, unless you want to call me Mom. I don't mind." "We have a mom." Gloria could see that Frances was going to be a problem. "Well, she's not here. Let me go over the rules now." "Ma'am, my sister is cold," Frances said. "Can you give her a sweater?" Gloria sighed. "Frances, shut it. I'm going over the rules, and then you all can go straight to bed." She knew that it was important to set the tone early. In the beginning, she'd been lax and had to deal with the aftermath. The kids needed to know the rules straight off. The rules were simple enough: stay out of the fridge, stay out of Gloria and Augie's bedroom, stay out of Matthew's bedroom. He was 14 and privacy was important to him. Bedtime was 7:30, wake up for school was 6:30, TV only if they were good. Chores could be posted on the fridge. Augie worked shifts. Matthew was busy in his room, so the girls didn't meet them until the next day at breakfast. By the time Augie wandered into the kitchen, the girls had already helped her cook breakfast, made their lunches, swept the floor, and set the table. He was in a t-shirt and shorts. Gloria thought about saying something, but then changed her mind. "Sit down, girls." They sat down next to each other, squeezing onto 2 chairs. "You're being silly," Gloria chided them. "One of you has to sit on the other side of the table." Marie got up slowly and went around the table. She sat down, her eyes on her sisters. "My goodness," Gloria said. She introduced them to Augie. "Welcome to our home," he said. 10 foster kids in 2 years, and he was still awkward as ever. Gloria told them to bow their heads, and Augie said a quick grace. Matthew joined them halfway through breakfast. His hair was messy, and his clothes looked like he had pulled them off from the floor. "My God, you're a slob," Augie said. Matt didn't reply as he served himself some bacon. The girls stared at him. He looked at his mom. "I told you they were coming." He nodded. "What I don't understand is why you don't show any pride in yourself," Augie said. "Do you know how the world sees you?" "Do you know how the world sees you?" Matt replied. "Don't be sharp with me." Augie's voice had an edge in it. Gloria knew this was because he'd slept only 4 hours. He needed another 4 at least. Still, there was no reason for them to be putting on a show for the girls. "Please," she said, "no fighting at the table. It'll give you ulcers." Matt smiled. "Well, they don't know what ulcers are." "Do they speak English?" Augie asked. "They do," Gloria said. "They're just shy." At 8, Gloria ushered the girls out of the house and packed them into the car. Janet, her next-door neighbor, was headed out of her house at the same time. Janet was a pharmacist. She had no children. She was always dressed to the nines. Gloria often felt dowdy next to her. "How cute," she said, walking over to Gloria's station wagon. She peeked over Gloria's shoulder. "They're adorable." "Thank you," said Gloria. "Look at those lips. I wish I had the time to foster," she added. "You're a saint for doing it." Gloria ducked her head. "I do what I can." "Let me know if you need a sitter sometime," Janet said. "I can whip up some s'mores when it gets warmer outside." "S'mores?" The littlest one spoke up. "They're delicious," Janet said, "and super good for you." Her laugh rang out. Gloria pulled out of the driveway. The school was 4 blocks away. They could walk it, of course, but Gloria wanted to drive them the first time they went. "Are you following where we're going?" she asked them. "You'll be walking home on your own after school." "What about Matt?" Frances asked. "He goes to a different school." Gloria dropped them off. Then she ran her errands, groceries, the bank, the hardware store. She barely made it home by 1. By then she was exhausted, but she got herself busy preparing for supper. Then she sat down to rest. Augie came out of the bedroom an hour later. He had his uniform on. Just sitting around, eh? He muttered. She ignored him. Shift work did not agree with him, but he was still 3 years away from making sergeant. Until then, they were stuck with this. He left and she went and fixed the bed. Then she went into Matt's bedroom. It was a mess as usual. She piled the dirty clothes into the basket. Then she fixed his bed. She got after him to clean up, but he never listened. Plus, he had lots of homework. He was a bit slower than other kids his age, so it took him longer. If only they could afford a tutor. Oddly enough, if one of the foster kids needed a tutor, the government would pay for that. Some people got all the breaks, and others had to work for every cent they had. She went into the girls' bedroom. There was a set of bunk beds and another twin bed across from the bunk bed. All the beds were made. She looked more closely. The girls got home about 4:30. We got lost, Frances said when they came inside. Take your shoes off. You're getting dust all over the floor, and shut that door, and don't ring the doorbell. You live here, for God's sake. She ushered them into the living room. Sit down now. I want to talk to you about something. They sat down, squeezing onto a single chair. There are 3 beds in that bedroom, but you're only using one of those beds. Frances shook her head. A liar. It's an insult to me if you don't sleep in your beds. I went and got those beds especially for you. Which wasn't the truth exactly. She had gone out to buy the twin bed when Jody, the social worker, had called. From now on, you'll sleep in your own beds, understand? She stared at them. Their dark eyes stared back at her. Say yes, so I know you understand me. They nodded in unison. For God's sake. Matt didn't show up for supper. Gloria remembered him saying something about a ball game, something like that. It was for the best. The girls felt more comfortable talking when it was just her and them. She asked them what they liked about the school. The playground is nice, Frances said. Lots of stuff to play on. I like outside, Marie agreed. Swings, Leela whispered. And the other kids? Gloria saw the momentary hesitation with Frances. Then she spoke. They're all really nice. Nice, Marie agreed. Fun, Leela said. Gloria let them watch an hour of TV. It felt rather peaceful as she read, and they sat across from her on the couch. Matt walked in the house and went straight to his bedroom. Matt, she called out. He didn't reply. She put the girls to bed that night and prayed with them. Now I lay me down to sleep. I pray the Lord my soul to keep. If I die before I wake, I pray the Lord my soul to take. It was a good prayer. It reminded you that you could die any time, so you better be good. She thought about going to bed, but decided against it. There was a wild wind screeching outside. It made Gloria think of tornadoes, and she poured herself a glass of wine. She slept through her alarm clock and woke up at 7:15. For God's sake, she threw on her bathrobe and rushed to the girls' bedroom. She opened the door. They were all sleeping in the same bed. Frances on the outside, Leela curled up beside her, and Marie on the other side. Frances's arms stretched under all of them, like she was their mother. Get up, she said loudly, get up. They scrambled out of bed. Put your clothes on. No, Marie, not the clothes from yesterday. There's clean clothes in your dresser there. Hurry up now, we're late. She got breakfast on the table by 8:15. Augie was sitting there waiting. He watched as she hurried around the kitchen, telling and showing the girls what needed to be done. It's damn near 9, he said. These girls are going to be late for school. Gloria thought about telling him to mind his own business, as if he cared about them. He was only interested in his own breakfast, but she made sure to serve him first. Eat up now, girls. We can't be late. Are we in trouble? Marie asked. Yes, Augie said. You're all going to jail. The girls went pale. Augie. I'm kidding around, Augie said. They know I'm joking, right? Frances smiled and nodded. March rolled around and the girls started playing outside in the yard. It was still sloppy with wet snow, but Gloria said it was okay as long as they didn't get wet. But no matter, they would come indoors covered in sweat from chasing one another around and playing God knows what outside. The social worker, Jody, stopped in and checked on the girls. She was supposed to come every 2 weeks, but because Gloria was an old pro, she only came once a month. She told the girls that they would be staying a bit longer. Marie started crying and Frances wrapped an arm around her. Leela stood next to them and sucked on her thumb. Gloria hated those visits. She had a hard time getting the kids back in order after them. Janet stopped in a couple times and bought some snacks for the kids. Little things, but Gloria appreciated it. But the girls weren't improving. Every morning, Gloria would check on them and they would be sleeping in the same bed. One afternoon, she sat them down. Because you're not listening to me, I'm going to have to change up the sleeping situation. They stared at her. From now on, Frances will sleep in the basement. Gloria had thought this through the night before. The basement wasn't finished, but it was clean. She put some blankets down there and a pillow. It would be like camping to an adventurous child. She looked at them closely. Marie's lip was trembling. Leela looked confused. Frances looked panicked for a second before a mask dropped over her features. Bedtime was trying. They made a huge fuss when Gloria led Frances out of the bedroom in her nightgown. Hush now, both of you, Gloria said. Matt's door opened and he stuck his head out. What's going on? Frances is going to sleep in the basement. In the basement. That's right, Gloria said. Gloria marched ahead of Frances down the stairs. She showed Frances the little bed she had made for her. Frances lay down. This is what happens when you don't listen, Gloria said. Actions have consequences. All right. So there's a lot more, but I thought I would leave it at that.
Awesome, Dawn. When do you expect to publish?
Well, I'm not sure yet. I've gotten it to the agent and everything, so hopefully within the year.
Wonderful. Well, we all look forward to making that the other bestseller on the top of the Globe and Mail list. As our wonderful event comes to a close tonight, we began this evening talking about a war, the war against Iraq and the war against women, which goes on endlessly. And it goes on endlessly because, especially for those of us who are men, we haven't gotten used to the fact that we need to step up and do more. And I'm hoping I can, as a writer, share just a very brief reading myself from a gentleman who was part of a group of 9 men and women in 1968 who made homemade napalm and poured it on draft files in an attempt to prevent the ongoing slaughter of the people of Vietnam. And in a closing statement, Daniel Berrigan, who would shortly afterwards go underground and be one of the most sought after men by J. Edgar Hoover's FBI, along with his brother Philip Berrigan and the others of the Catonsville Nine, said this to the judge of their act of burning draft files to prevent young men from going over to kill other young men in Vietnam. He talked about this act, quote, for which we shall beyond doubt be placed behind bars and for some portion of our natural lives in consequence of our inability to live and die content in the plagued city, to say peace, peace when there is no peace, to keep the poor, poor, the thirsty and hungry, thirsty and hungry. Our apologies, good friends, for the fracture of good order, the burning of paper instead of children, the angering of the orderlies in the front parlor of the charnel house. We could not, so help us God, do otherwise, for we are sick at heart. Our hearts give us no rest for thinking of the land of burning children. All of us who act against the law turn to the poor of the world, to the Vietnamese, to the victims, to the soldiers who kill and die for the wrong reasons and for no reason at all, because they were so ordered by the authorities of that public order, which is in effect a massive institutionalized disorder. We say killing is disorder, life and gentleness and community and unselfishness is the only order we recognize. And for the sake of that order, we risk our liberty, our good name. The time is past when good men may be silent, when obedience can segregate men from public risk, when the poor can die without defense. How many indeed must die before our voices are heard? How many must be tortured and dislocated, starved, maddened? How long must the world's resources be raped in the service of legalized murder? When, at what point will you say no to this war? We have chosen to say with the gift of our liberty, and if necessary, our lives, the violence stops here. The death stops here. The suppression of the truth stops here. This war stops here. Redeem the times. The times are inexpressibly evil, and yet, the times are inexhaustibly good, solaced by the courage and hope of many. And as I think about that closing statement that Daniel Berrigan made before he was put into handcuffs and sent off to the federal penitentiary, I think of the fact that that could describe 2023 as wars rage in Syria and in Somalia, and Ethiopia, and Ukraine, and here on Turtle Island as the war against women continues relentlessly. And as horrible as these times are, we can take solace and comfort in the hope that we ourselves can carve out in our own lives. And tonight is one measure of carving out that hope and that strength and that solidarity. And Dawn, there's so much love in this webinar, and I hope you can sincerely feel it tonight that well over 100 people have chosen to spend this time together. They are contributing on the GoFundMe page. They are sending e-transfers. They are signing the petition, and they are joining the Family Court Hurts Facebook page as well. We'd love to thank Monia Mazig, Megan Strymus, also known as Eden Robinson, Duncan Mercurdy, Megan Strymus herself, Farzana Doctor, Richard Van Camp, Tony, and of course you, Dawn, and all of you who have participated in an event which is very different in these strange times. It would be so lovely for all of us to be in the same room, to come up to you, Dawn, afterwards and to shake your hand and offer you a hug. But I hope that we can do that virtually for now until the times are better. And we are a community who will be here as long as you need in support. And I hope you can feel that. Would anyone of our wonderful readers like to say a few parting words to Dawn and to those who have spent the evening with us? Maybe we could start with Richard.
Dawn, we love you. I
Thank
hope
you.
you can feel it. Stay strong, one day at a time. Be there for your little one and be there for yourself. Now feel all this love that we have for you. I'm so sorry for everything you've gone through, Dawn. I can't imagine it. I hope you write about it. One day, when you're ready, you tell the story of what happened and why you did what you did and where you went, where you felt that you needed to go. It's so lovely to see you. I freaking wrote to you so many times. I FaceTimed you so many times, 4 o'clock in the morning, and I just kept praying that you would answer. And this is the best answer of all, to see your smile, just to know that you're still here. Because there was quite a few nights I was worried that you weren't. And you have to know how worried we all were. But this is the ultimate relief. And I'm looking forward to seeing how this turns out. But you're with us, and you are a sacred, precious gift. And I didn't know you were a lawyer. Were you really a lawyer?
I have a law degree, but I did not practice law. No.
I had no idea. So you did stand-up comedy. Weren't you in politics too?
I ran for the Liberal Party as an MP, yes.
Holy cow, exactly what Matthew said. I don't know how you do what you do. You are a force.
But that mention of the Liberal Party, I see a contribution coming in from Justin the Feminist Trudeau. Well done, Justin. Come through.
Anyways, I'll pass the mic, but Dawn, your smile is all I needed to see tonight. Masi Cho. Bless you all. Thank you.
And I'm going to go to Hamilton now. Megan?
Hi, Dawn. I just want to say, my gosh, that story You're brilliant. So I am rooting for you, and I hope someday we can see each other in person, and I hope I can give you a huge hug. And I'm here if you ever want to reach out too. Thank you. And I have hope.
Yeah.
Rosanna?
So Dawn, I don't think we've ever met before, and I'm just a big fan of your writing. And I'm also here. I can help to mobilize the writer community and reach out if you need support.
Thank you.
Let's see, Duncan?
Stay strong. Stay strong, Seamus. Stay strong.
And Monia? Can you unmute, Monia?
Yes. Dawn, I hope that my grandma used to say there is nothing that is eternal. So let's hope that this despair and the situation you are in is not going to be eternal, and everything will be one day a story told, and hopefully a good one. So I really wish you all the best. It's tough, but I'm sure you are loved, and you have people who are going to support you.
And Eden, the real Eden.
Well, I look forward to meeting you all on the festival circuit. And in the future, I'm pretty sure we will cross paths, and I can't wait to give you a great big hug in person. Mwah.
Wow. Thank you. So sweet.
And in the chat, there's just so many loving, supportive comments, and we can save those, and you can read those tonight later on, Dawn, and share them with Kathy and everyone else. Thank you, everyone, for reading tonight and for sharing so much. And thank you for all of you who have joined us on this webinar and this event. Stay in touch. I'm going to follow up with all of you and remind you that we're going to need to be writing letters. We're going to need to be pushing petitions. We're going to need to be putting our faces out there to say, I support Dawn, because they monitor this stuff. They monitor social media. They monitor what gets into the Saskatoon Star Phoenix. Write a letter to the editor. Buy Dawn's book. There's so many different ways that we can support. And maybe you can look at what's going on in your own community, because there's a Dawn in every community in this country. There are many Dawns in many communities in this country. And if you don't know how to reach out to them, you just call up the local women's shelter. You call up Women's Support Services and say, I'm ready to volunteer. I'm ready to listen. And I'm ready to learn. And I especially send that message out to my brothers out there to say, we say this every year on December 6th. We say this every year on February 14th at the strawberry ceremony. We have to say it 365 days a year. 2 days is just not cutting it. So again, thank you. And this is the kind of love that will overcome violence and dismantle it and just declaw it. It has to happen, and it's going to happen. So thank you again for joining us tonight, and we look forward to seeing you at upcoming events. We will be looking at an event looking at the violence of the family law system. We are looking at a musical event as well. So if you'd like to see a certain artist singing their songs, we'd love to do a musical evening as well. And we're also looking at a theatrical event in which women, their stories will be read by professional actors across this country as well. So there's lots of different ways that you can contribute regardless of where your talent lies. There's a place for you in this struggle to free Dawn and to free all the women who are currently being subjected to such horrific violence. So thank you again for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you again soon.
I left Saskatoon because I feared for my safety and that of my son. I was failed by the Saskatchewan justice system, the family law system, and child protection. I filed police reports to the Saskatoon Police Service and the RCMP regarding the domestic abuse, but nothing was done. The police services did nothing to assist me. I reported my concerns to the child protection authorities, and again, nothing was done. I am fighting systems that continuously fail to protect me as an Indigenous woman and protect non-Indigenous men. This does not surprise me. Saskatchewan and the systems within have failed Indigenous people since colonization. We need to remember that on August 9th, 2016, Colton Boushie was killed, and the Saskatchewan justice system failed Indigenous people in that case too. I have been diagnosed from PTSD from the years of domestic abuse and continued abusive behavior during the family law proceedings. I witnessed something with my son that scared me to my core. More will come out as I further tell my story upon my return to our treaty lands. I apologize to anyone I hurt. I was left with no choice. No one heard me. I love my son so very much. He is my only child, and I would do absolutely anything for him. My first priority has always been my son, and I was motivated out of my immense love for him. I will face the repercussions of my decision. For all the missing and murdered Indigenous women, I have a story to tell and wish to return to Canada to tell it. I didn't mean to hurt you, my friends and family, and the other women who cannot obtain justice anywhere we turn. So many women and children before us have had to run for their lives to protect their children. The SBS and RCMP only cared when they thought I was dead, and the pressure they were under because of their blatant failures. Ask for support to return to Canada, to my treaty lands, where I will continue in my pursuit for justice for myself and for my son. I thank you from my heart for your love and support, and for believing that I have my truth to tell. Dawn Walker, Mount Noah County Jail, August 8th, 2022.